Just hide those controls. All right, so thank you so much for joining us this morning as we talk about metadata creation for dLOC. Before we get started, I would like to introduce myself. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Laura Perry. I am the head of digital services for the George A. Smathers Libraries at the University of Florida. Here, I oversee the department responsible for the digitization and ingestion of content into the UF digital collections. I also serve as a dLOC technical director, so I provide guidance on digitization best practices, developing workflows, and creating metadata. I also facilitate the transfer of electronic content and ingest that content into dLOC. So enough about me. Today's workshop is all about metadata and why it's crucial for us and our users. During our time today, I will share resources for creating cohesive metadata. We will explore examples of metadata creation for archival collections, serials, and periodicals, and we'll discuss the next steps after the metadata template is complete. Lastly, I will share some information about the dLOC Technologies LibGuide to assist in the support of your digitization and metadata efforts. So why metadata? Metadata is data that describes other data. It provides context and additional information that can help search engines and users better understand and find non-contextual content. For example, metadata for a photograph could include a description of what is depicted, the location, and the date taken. When it comes to online searches, text-based content is usually the front runner. However, other formats such as audio, images, and video can be just as valuable if they are accompanied by relevant metadata. Metadata is not just important for non-textual content. It can also improve the discoverability of text documents by providing keywords and descriptions that explain what the document is about. Robust metadata assists us in organizing and identifying our digital resources, while also allowing our users to discover and build upon our collections. Within dLOC, the metadata provides different ways that information and images can be searched, organized, and displayed. Before we proceed, I want to discuss some important things to consider when creating metadata. The first consideration is to review the required fields and determine which specific metadata elements you want to include. Consistency and comprehensiveness are key. For example, the creator field, if used, could be presented as last name, comma, first name, or first name, comma, last name. However, using both will reduce the metadata's effectiveness because searching on one or the other will only yield results for that exact match. Similarly, when using a subject element, it is important to tag everything that belongs to a subject with the same words. If some articles about computers are tagged as desktops and others are tagged as laptops, a researcher won't receive a full list of those results. So before we jump into the metadata template, I would also like to share some resources to assist us with the creation of metadata. The first is a quick guide that can be found on dLOC, as well as on the dLOC Technologies LibGuide. Let's see, I'll pull it open here. So the quick guide, when we pull it up in dLOC, can be found with all of its corresponding metadata. And by clicking on the PDF file here, we can see the 7 steps for submitting materials to dLOC. I would like to share that this content is available in both English, French, and Spanish. The second resource is a link to Search Fast, which is where we can find subject headings via a search box. We'll come back to this just a little later when we get to the template. Last but not least is the dLOC metadata template. The template has 3 tabs. The first is an overview of fields. The second tab is the metadata to complete, which is where we will populate the metadata. The last tab is a serial inventory to complete, which is only necessary when sharing serials or periodicals, such as newspapers or journal articles. So far, we've discussed why metadata is important and things to consider when creating metadata. We've also familiarized with some available resources to assist with metadata creation. Now we are at a point to start talking about the dLOC metadata template. As we start to acquaint ourselves with the template, I would like to point out a few things. The first is that the template is super flexible. There are only 7 required fields. And if we want to repeat any field, we can simply add a column to the right in the spreadsheet and then just copy that column header name. Several of the fields are not required, though the more metadata, the better. If we don't have metadata to include in a non-required field, we can simply leave it blank. When filling out the template, it should be 1 item or title per row. And then when adding additional creators or subjects, it should be 1 entry per cell. So this is where we would insert that new column and copy the column header name. So here is a quick overview of the various fields included in the template. This chart can be used to determine which fields are required and or repeatable. So as you can see, we just have the 7 listed here that are required, and then quite a few that are able to be repeated. So without further delay, let's jump into the metadata template. As previously mentioned, the metadata template contains 3 tabs. The overview of field tabs includes information about each of the various fields, along with guidance as to how that data should be formatted for any particular field. We can also see which fields are required and or repeatable. Listed in column A here are all the field names, and these will end up being your column headers on the metadata to complete tab. Then the second tab is where we begin populating the metadata. So this is all of those column headers that we just saw on the previous tab, and then they continue on to the right here. Again, not all of these are required, but the more metadata we have, that obviously enhances the discoverability of our materials. The last tab is a serial inventory tab. This is only necessary to complete when sharing periodicals or serials. So now that we've taken a peek at the metadata template, let's see how a template is filled out as it relates to archival materials. I've created a sample template for us to review, which can be seen here. I have entered metadata for what will be 2 items. Some of the fields are populated while others are empty, which is perfectly acceptable since not all of the fields are required. As a reminder, the template should be completed, so each title is an individual row in the spreadsheet. And in the event of repeatable fields, please remember it is 1 entry per cell. So as we can see, we have multiple subject keywords here. And instead of having example and training in 1 cell, they are broken out into their individual cells. So when the fields are repeatable, what we will do is we will add new columns to do that. So I created these examples here with 2 subject keywords already, but I thought it would be helpful since it pertains to our metadata workshop today to use the search fast functionality and familiarize ourselves with that a little bit. So this is search fast. As we can see, there is a search bar at the top, and when we want to enter a particular term, such as metadata for today's session, we can type that into the box and click search, and then we can see a number of results that are returned. By clicking on these individual results, we can see additional term details. So we'll click through some of those, like metadata harvesting, for example. We can see some additional context or how that is used. It does appear that metadata is the first result is the most appropriate for our workshop today. So let's add that into the template. To do so, I'm going to just add a column to the right of our last subject authority, and I'll add 1 more. And then because we're adding a subject keyword and a subject authority, we're just going to copy and paste these column headers. I will then enter that new term into the column, And then the subject authority we will use as fast, since that's where we located this term. The subject authority is typically all lowercase, but if it comes over with different formatting, we can make those adjustments. I'm going to apply this new subject to both records that I have created. Let's see. So now that we have two new columns, we've copied the corresponding column headers, and we've added these to our metadata template. This will end up applying this new metadata term to both records. Within the quick guide, there is a mention of adding a project name to the metadata to assist with linking records together. So let's add another two columns to the right of the last subject authority and add a project name. So because subject keywords and subject authorities are repeatable fields, and we ran out of room the first time, we'll just add additional columns. For the purposes of this example, I will simply add project name as a subject keyword. Typically, project names are institution specific, so the project name isn't likely to be found in Search Fast. In these instances, we can use local as a subject authority. We will apply those new keywords to each record. And then moving on, there are two other fields that I would like to highlight. The first is the rights field. Move that over so we can see this better. The rights field is one area that can generate a lot of questions. So please know there is support available for navigating copyright issues and creating rights metadata. The last field I want to highlight is the digital folder name. When sharing the metadata in digital packages with us, the corresponding folder names are required, as this ensures that we upload the images to the correct metadata. As with the metadata template, it should be one item per folder. I'll pull up my slide deck here. So for example, we could see that my first folder name was sample_01. Inside of that folder are the corresponding images for that folder. And then that folder matches our title of a sample record. So when I open this record, for example, I'll see the title, I'll see the digital folder name, and I will know that those images correspond with that title. It's super important for us just to make sure that we don't make any mistakes as we're ingesting your materials. Then one thing I would also like to point out, so here in my example, I have that there are 4 TIFF images for this first title, and then we also see a PDF. The file types are usually project specific, and so don't be alarmed if your folders don't match this exact sample. Sometimes we have PDFs, other times we have TIFF images, other times we are working with audio and video files, so it really is just dependent on the materials you're working with. So since we're working with single items in this example, we will leave the serial inventory blank, and we'll revisit that in just a minute. So once I finished creating the metadata, I ingested it into dLOC so that we could take a look at how everything is displaying. So for that sample record that I created, this is what it displays like inside of dLOC. We can see how each of the various fields were included from the template now display on the website. And as previously mentioned, it is super important to use the same subject terms in the same format each time, as this allows them to be linked together. So by clicking on the project name that we added, for example, we can see that it returns the 2 sample records that I created because that project name was formatted in the same manner for each item. So now that we have created metadata for a single item and reviewed how it displays in dLOC, we can move on to metadata creation for serials and title sets. This process is fairly similar to that of a single item. However, we will need to fill in the serials inventory spreadsheet in this example. So I started by adding some basic metadata for this government gazette, which has multiple issues. So in this example, again, we'd want to make sure that each title is its own row in the spreadsheet. And then we make sure that it also has the digital folder name. Once we have that filled out, then we will move over to the serial inventory. In preparation for our workshop, I did enter a few examples. So I've included the title, the volume and number, the date, and the digital folder name. Please note the volume and issue number are not required. Again, it's just helpful information to have, but if it's not listed for your particular periodical, that's perfectly okay. So let's take a peek at how the folder structure appears for serials. As we can see, the folder name here aligns. Let me pull this up this way. We can see that our folder names match what we're seeing here on the right. And then inside of those folders, we then see the corresponding images. So each row in the spreadsheet should have its own folder. And then within inside that folder, each set of individual images. And then we can see how it appears inside of dLOC. So we had some basic information such as the title. We had a series title, which will also help group records together. We had the subjects and keywords, and then just a general note. Because we entered the information on the serial inventory spreadsheet, we can click on all volumes and then see how those items are represented. So by clicking on, by expanding 1901 and then clicking on January 2nd, 1901, we would then pull up the images and the record for that individual issue. So now let's fast forward a little bit and we'll pretend that we've completed our metadata templates. So what are the next steps after the metadata creation is complete? Typically, we ask that you send me the spreadsheet along with transferring the digital folders. This can be done in several ways, including Dropbox, Google Drive, WeTransfer, really any file sharing method you're comfortable with. Once I receive the metadata template and the corresponding folders, I will ingest everything into dLOC and share the new URLs. This process usually takes 1 to 2 weeks to complete, but can sometimes be longer depending on our capacity and the number of projects in the queue at any given time. So now that we've gone over all of this, I would like to highlight the dLOC Technologies LibGuide. The LibGuide contains technical resources for submitting materials, such as the quick guides that we went over, along with the metadata template, and it also includes documentation on the setup and use of various scanning equipment. We also have a list of our previous trainings, so the slide deck and recording of today's session will become available here in the next week or so. So I know that was a lot of information all at once. Please know that we are available to answer any questions as you begin to fill out your metadata template. I thank you for joining us today. And at this point, I think we open it up to questions and an open discussion.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much, Laura. You can stop sharing your screen now.
Okay.
And we're going to stop recording.